Okay. So welcome, Lisa, to part 2 of the series with the Georgian Association about navigating college admissions as Georgian Americans. Thank you again for your time and guiding our students through this very interesting and exciting process. Over to you.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I will share my screen. Go. Does this look good on everyone's end?
Looks right to me. I will
Okay.
have to pin it just to make sure that you are pinned like this. So go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for joining. I had a wonderful time speaking to the group it was last month, and I'm glad to be back and hopefully can share some more insights based on my experience and what I've seen other people go through, and happy to answer any questions. So the first seminar was more so an overview of what the application looks like, what you should be doing depending on where you are in high school, and how you can best position yourself for success. This part of the seminar really delves into writing and writing the personal statement, but also the activities section and also your supplemental essays that certain colleges ask of you. This is probably one of the most important parts of the application and a part that you can start practicing early to really get comfortable with it, because it's not a skill that we're really taught in high school, and it's a skill that you have to develop on your own in terms of self-reflection, finding out what matters to you, what values you have, and what you really want to promote and reflect the colleges that you're applying to. So again, just a bit of background about myself. I graduated from UVA undergrad. I'm headed off to medical school in the fall. I'm by no means an expert on what I'm talking to you about, but I have been through a lot of applications in my life. So I might not be an expert, but I am a seasoned participant in the process. So again, the overall message that I really want to give off with all my seminars is you must take control of your college process. You are the person going through it. You're the person who plans for it, organizes all your essays, and communicates to the people that need to be communicated to make sure that you are ahead of all that you can do, and that you give yourself time and grace and are not too overwhelmed with what comes your way, because life is challenging and there are a lot of changes in this process. So hopefully you position yourself for success in whatever ways that you can. Okay, the agenda for today, I'll quickly go over what the different writing components of the application look like, the activities section, the school supplemental essays that some colleges might have, the personal statement, which will be seen by all colleges. And then at the end, I was hoping to have a little bit of a workshop. I don't know exactly who's in the audience right now, if they're all students or parents, but maybe we can all participate together and hopefully get your creative juices flowing about what the kind of brainstorming and planning part of writing essays might look like. And then in the end, we can open it for questions. So the writing components of the application. So in 3 parts is how I like to summarize the writing components. You have the activity section, where you describe what you've been involved in during high school. And this can range from clubs to sports to theater to leadership opportunities. Maybe you taught, maybe you tutored, maybe you had jobs, maybe you babysat or did work at home. You describe your activities and then also why they were impactful to you and what impact you had. You have the personal statement, which is you writing a really long essay. I think it's around 1 page, single spaced, about a big prompt about kind of what makes you you, and what have been kind of big moments in your life that have shaped you. And you can take that in any which direction you would like. And then there's school specific essays. So some schools ask for additional essays, some don't. Some place more emphasis on their own essays and some place more emphasis on your personal statement. It all varies based on school, but it's important that you look at these essays ahead of time and then try to plan best for what the stories that you would want to tell in each one. I also will say on this slide that it's fine to reuse your essays. I mean, your personal statement will be one essay that all schools will see, but if you wrote a lovely essay for Duke that you want to reuse for UVA, feel free to do so, but make sure that when you do copy and paste it first, that you change Duke to UVA, but that you make sure that you're answering the school's question, the prompt that is being asked of you. Otherwise, if you write strong essays, if you have great messages that you're promoting in certain school supplemental essays, then feel free to reuse them for others. People do this all the time and it's expected. Okay, so starting with the activity section. I kind of talked about this a little bit in my last presentation, but what you spend your time doing in high school reveals a lot about yourself. It reveals what matters to you, and it reveals what values you have, both kind of what you value and thus what do you do with the time that you have, but also how this activity might shape you. So maybe you volunteer at your local Habitat for Humanity, which is an organization that helps build houses. So you value maybe affordable housing, you value serving communities that are underserved, but maybe this organization has also impacted you. Maybe you have now a better understanding of the community in which you live and a housing crisis that might have happened and the history behind why certain families in your community do not have access to affordable housing. So you kind of can take this one activity that you do a couple hours every month and really develop it into how that impacts you and what impact you also have on it. This is also a great opportunity for you to show your Georgian heritage. Maybe you volunteer at the Georgian Association, or maybe you volunteer at your church or synagogue or mosque, whatever religious affinity you have. Maybe you go to Georgian folk dance. Maybe you play on a traditional Georgian instrument. Maybe you have kind of these Georgian you engage in Georgian culture in ways that take a lot of your time and thus are worthy of being highlighted in the activities section. I wanted to include a screenshot of what this activity what the activity section looks like. Also want to say that this is all from the Common Application, which is what the majority of colleges in the US use for your application. Some schools might have different systems, but just make sure you're doing your research. Usually it's safe to assume that most schools are on this application. So you are given up to 10 activities that you can kind of give information about. That's not to say that that's like the only activities that you can talk about. I believe that there's a section in your common application that gives you free rein to explain more, and maybe you can include more activities there. But 10 activities kind of first tells you that you don't need to do everything in high school. And honestly, don't do everything in high school. Make sure that what you do, it's quality over quantity. So you really have the reins to explain 10 activities in depth here, right? Make sure you don't do 20 and you only spend maybe an hour every semester in each activity, but rather maybe you spend much more time in 6 activities and you make really big impact in those. I think that is a bit more impactful in terms of presenting your overall application. But to start, the activity starts with activity type. So the dropdown has kind of like arts, sports, leadership, teaching, those types of categories. And you can put yourself in that category, this activity in that category. There's also an other category, but if your activity kind of fits somewhat into one of them, I think it's probably better to put it in those. Your position, so maybe let's say we're going to talk about a club. Your position might be president, or maybe you're secretary. The organization name, the club might be the Georgian Association Club of your local high school. And then you describe your activity. And you're given 150 characters, which is really, really short. So this is kind of like a really important part of the activity section, is what you write in this small couple sentences that you're given. people think that the activity section is really easy to do, right? Like you're only going to write 2 sentences about every activity, but it's actually really hard because how are you going to summarize all that you've done, let's say for the Georgian Association Club, in a couple sentences? How are you going to summarize the impact that your presidency has had or your other position in that association has had? It's really hard. So this is something that if you start early on, it's really easy to knock out because you already know the impact you've made, and it doesn't take that much self-reflection, but it does take a lot of practice to get your words down and be succinct. You check off the grade levels in which you participated in this activity, and you can do multiple grade levels. Postgraduate means that you plan on participating after you graduate, so maybe the summer before college. The timing of the participation, was it during the school year, during the school break, or all year? The hours spent per week, the weeks spent per year, and then the last question is, I intend to participate in a similar activity in college. This part, I would say, make sure that maybe, I don't know, like at least half or a little less than half, you do say you intend to participate in a similar activity during college. This is so that when the college admissions officer reads your application, they see that this person has demonstrated interest in XYZ, and they will continue being involved in their interests in my community, in my college. So they know what type of kind of communities you'll fit in when you go into the college, and they'll see that, oh, this person's word of I'm interested in this and these are my passions do hold true, or the person plans to make sure that holds true during college. And if there are activities that you don't plan on continuing in college, that's also fine and you can be honest, but make sure that you're not answering no to every single activity you put down, because that's not, it kind of makes the reader think, oh, is this person truly curious in what they do? And do all the activities that the person wrote down really reflect what the person values? And then my final note on this slide is to keep track of your hours early on. I know there might be some students or parents of students who are sophomores or juniors or even freshmen on the call. If you're involved in something that you think that you will be involved in for the rest of your 4 years, just make note of how many hours maybe you spend a week. And it can be very general. I mean, nobody's going to run after you and collect your hours or verify these hours, right? You're self-reporting these. But if you write that you spend 20 hours a week on all these activities, that's going to raise a red flag. If there's something that raises a red flag that your teachers might see and say, hey, you did not spend this much time, just make sure you're being truthful about what you're saying, but you also don't have to get it super specific. So if you keep track of your hours early, I think it'll save you a lot of time in your senior year when then you're having to think back of how many hours you spent in your first year working on a certain activity. That'll kind of give you time to focus on things that really do matter. Okay, so this is part of remaining succinct. So you only have so many characters to describe what activity you're involved in. This is a screenshot that I grabbed from the Common Application website itself, where they give 2 examples. The above one is the original example of this long-winded 2 sentences, 3 sentences that a person wrote about what they did, and then they showed you how you can cut it down. One thing that you can do when you cut it down is just start with the verb that you did. Like, I volunteered at XYZ, I developed XYZ, instead of, for 2 years, I was a volunteer at whatever. First off, the 2 years you've already explained in the slide prior, or in one of these sections prior, you've already shown what years you've participated, you've shown how many hours you've participated, what time of year, you've shown what your position is. None of this should be repeated in the section where you talk about what you did. You don't want to repeat information because you only have a tiny set of space to show the impact that you had. With this, kind of things that you should be calling out. First, were you given awards? I have an example here. Were you given a community service award for the work that you did in a certain activity? Did you reach a milestone? So maybe you were president of a club and the club raised money that was kind of a record-breaking amount in your 20 years of the club's history. And maybe give examples of measurable impact that you had. Maybe you hosted a clinic where you gave local community members access to primary care. Are you able to say how many patients signed up? Maybe you run a social media account for your club or an organization. Can you say maybe once you joined the club, you raised engagement on your social media by 400% or your followers by 200%? If you're able to kind of take out those measurable impact, then people can easily process that information and see what you really did. See this person's example, they volunteered at a local animal shelter, and then they were given more responsibility and now volunteer as a receptionist. It's great if you explain also a move from, you were just a member in a club and you did accomplished certain things and then you became the president, but make sure you're succinct and you don't let the transitionary explanation take over your impact and what you did. Another thing that I like to recommend is to use strong action verbs when you're describing your activities. First, my first recommendation was start with a verb when you're describing what you did, but make sure the verbs are powerful. So don't say, did, don't say, kind of spent time. Make sure you say like, kind of words that really reflect what you did. If you created pamphlets, maybe say create. If you were an advocate for a certain cause, say advocated. Maybe not like talked about certain issues, but maybe you say advocated for certain issues, or negotiated for more resources towards this issue. So be a bit more specific of what you really did and what your role was. And not only does that help the application reader get a better sense of what you did, but it also gives you an opportunity to show the responsibility that you took. This is what I call resume verbs, because in your resume, when you do create them, I don't know if you all have any resumes, but when you do write a resume, kind of the format is similar to an activity section. You have your organization, you have your position, what you did, and 2 bullets max maybe of what kind of your role was and what the impact was of your role. And so in those 2 sentences, they usually start off with a verb that shows kind of leadership, shows charge, shows creativity. And also make sure that the verbs align with the role that you had. So again, looking at the screenshot to the left, if your role was a president, then you would want to use something along the lines of the leadership and initiative realm. So maybe you spearheaded a certain initiative, or maybe you implemented a groundbreaking policy in your school. If your involvement was more creative, maybe you were in the arts, maybe you sculpted a new program for your art show, or maybe you innovated the ways that your group was thinking about a certain performance or maybe a certain event. There are different ways that you can show what you did that reflect both the activity and also the initiative that you took to take more responsibility. Right, delving into the school supplemental essays. So again, some schools do ask you to write a bit more. And one of the main questions that a lot of them ask is, why are you applying to this college? And I don't know, I can't say kind of what percentage of schools ask this question, but I'm sure in your school list, there will be at least one that does. There are a lot of cliches and common pitfalls that people fall into when answering this question, one of which being writing about how prestigious the school is. People applying, Duke application readers don't want to keep reading, you are ranked number 2 in XYZ, and I'm so excited for the prestige that I would get if I was an alma mater of Duke. That's not something that's very engaging for an application reader to read. Maybe applicants to NYU probably don't want to read over and over again that you're just in love with the city and you love Times Square and you really want to be living in the city. That's not that unique. And all the time, there's probably people writing about athletics that they love watching UVA basketball, of course. And although it might be really reflective of how you're feeling, it's not going to stand out. And it's obviously fine to not stand out if that's not your goal, but you do want to make sure you catch the attention of the admissions officer in a way that at least doesn't just give you kind of a negative outlook, give them a negative outlook on your application. Another thing that people write is, the moment that I stepped on the campus, it just felt right. That's also just a common sentence that's used. And again, you could have, when you stepped on the campus, like felt that it was the place for you, but maybe give it a bit more information. Like, why did it feel that way? Maybe it was certain architecture that reminds you of where you grew up or your grandparents' home. Maybe it was a student that helped you find where you were going when you looked lost and you really liked that people were willing to come up to you and engage to you. Maybe it was when you were walking down the street and everyone that you passed said hi to you and you felt as if you were already a part of the community and you never felt like that before. So kind of take those kind of unique experiences that you have had with the school, if you have had the privilege to go there and visit, and explain why it felt right. Don't just say, I walked in and it felt great. Things that you can do: view this essay question as not a why this college, but why you and this college. Why are you two a perfect match for each other? So don't just speak a college's praises, but speak their praises based on what you're interested in and how you would fit into the wonderful things that the school offers. So one of the ways that you can do this is show how your current involvements align with what you want to do in school. So let's say you really want to go to UVA because there's this one lab or this one center that researches a disease that is really important to you. Maybe it's important to you because someone in your family has had it. Maybe it's important to you because you've done a lot of research on it and you've seen kind of the impact that it could have in some underserved population that is really close to you or that you care about. You can talk about how you would really love to participate in that when you enter college. You could also maybe talk about how involvements that you've been a part of that are similar to it and how that would be a continuation of your interest and building on the passion that you already have. It would also be a great idea to mention school specific programs, and this is when a lot of research on your end comes into play. So maybe there's an honors college that's interesting to you. Honors colleges are, sometimes colleges have subset honors colleges where students, I think, apply into them and are given maybe a bit more opportunities, mentorship, like a community that they can consult with. Sometimes these honors colleges are more topic based. So it might be like a pre-vet honors college, or it could be an honors college in general, where it is like the honor students that are a part of it. Maybe that's something that's interesting to you that you could write about. There's also such thing as living learning communities that some colleges have, where they're dorms for first year students, and living learning communities are dorms or houses that are for students that are interested in similar things. So there might be a entrepreneurship and innovation living learning communities. One of my friends was in one of those in College of Charleston. And so she was in a house with a bunch of people who want to be entrepreneurs. So you could write about how you have this passion for innovation and you would love to be surrounded by other people who have creative thoughts and are willing to partner with one another. And you hope that you can meet your future business partner in this living learning community one day, and maybe tie it to your current involvements and maybe show, you are already an entrepreneur and you might have submitted something in a science fair, a novel idea there, or you have your own personal business and you plan to continue having more. Another example, maybe the school offers interdisciplinary majors. So maybe you're an engineering student who also really loves the arts and loves photography. if this school allows an engineering student to also take classes or double major or minor within another school, maybe the architecture school or maybe the College of Arts and Sciences, that is something that you should call out because that might be unique to this school. And then again, research centers or other unique centers or professors maybe who are in the school that you would love to learn from. And then finally, to demonstrate ways that you have engaged with the school. So if you had the opportunity to visit the school and again, maybe you met a student that talked to you about the school or kind of told you a sentence or two that really stuck with you and pushed you to apply to this school and made you realize that you would be a good fit, tell the admissions committee, show them that you have really taken that extra step to get to know the school and what has stuck with you as a result. So part of the supplemental essays, there are other questions that they ask. And it's important, I've put a couple of these questions here that I thought were a bit interesting that you could read and think of. Some of you might be years behind writing on these essays. You know, this is not something on your radar just yet, but these are the type of questions that are asked, and a lot of them are creative. Some of them are pretty direct. There are many, many different ways that you can take the direction that you take in responding to them. But overall, it's what the questions are getting at is how your experiences and your background will help inspire and inform others at this certain college. What unique aspect about you, what about your background, what about your passions, what about your interests and what you know will help you be a contributing member in the college? The college admissions counselors want to make sure that you are going to come into this college and make it a better place after you leave it. They want to make sure that you uplift your classmates, that you join communities, that you find a community and maybe you build your own communities, and that you can make sure that the school achieves its mission, whatever that is. You know, some schools are very mission oriented or service oriented. Some schools are very research oriented. They just want to make sure you would fit in that kind of mold of a student. And then also how your experiences, again, here will bring something to the community that the school would value. Again, if the school values service, if the school values humility, maybe these are things that you would want to emphasize. And the bottom four are questions that were asked. And I really like these questions because it shows you how creative you can be. The first one says, which book, song, character, song, monologue, or piece of work seems made for you and why? You can take this in any direction, right? Like character. You could talk about a cartoon character that you used to watch when you were 5 years old and seemed made for you. Why is that? Maybe the character had crazy hair and you always grew up with crazy hair and that was always something about you that stood out. So, and that could be stood out in a great way where people would come up to you and they would engage with you and ask you questions because of your hair. And then that taught you how to be open and that kind of taught you how important it is to approach others with curiosity. It could also be a challenging story of maybe there's a certain aspect of yourself that relates to the character of maybe feeling like a loner or maybe feeling not in a bad sense, but feeling that you've always been a little bit different and not really fit into crowds. So how does that impact you? How does that impact the way you view the world? And how does that impact the way you treat others? Maybe with more kindness and more openness. And maybe you are the one that now takes that extra step to get to know others and to make sure that they feel included because you didn't when you were younger. So again, you can take this question and talk about something completely different, but it allows you to be more creative with your response. Another question that I really loved is if we visited your town, what would you want us to show us? We all come from different areas, and also the way that we define town can be different, and the way that we define your can be different. It could be where your dad grew up, it can be where your mom grew up, it can be where your grandparents live. Um, It could be a certain aspect of the town that you want to highlight. What would you want to show us? Maybe you want to show them the chocolate factory that you grew up going to with your grandfather, who means a lot to you, and you can explain that story. Maybe you would show this person an art mural, a wall with a certain painting that means a lot to you in your community. You could kind of break down what you would want to highlight in your town. And with all of this, with all these questions, yes, you're explaining kind of where you would take them in Tbilisi or Batumi or Tel Aviv. Like you can explain that, right? But the person really wants to learn more about you. So why are you choosing to take this person back to Georgia and to show them that one building that you're in love with? And what does that tell them about you? And what does that tell them about what you value? And how are these values reflected in what you do? And this is all things that are explicit, but also implied in what you write. And hopefully the workshop kind of at the end of this can help you practice. So again, you're focusing less on, and they care less about what song you're interested in, right? They don't want you to copy and paste Beyonce lyrics. They want you to maybe take one or two lines out and show them more about you, talk more about you than talk less about Beyonce. Um, these essays for me are a bit more fun to look at because it helps me be more creative. You know, my suggestion to you is if you're having a hard time answering a prompt for a certain school, go to different schools and see what their prompts are, and maybe their kind of unique questions can help you brainstorm certain stories in your life that might reflect the values that another school is asking about. And I think once you kind of engage in this exercise and really start writing, these suggestions will be a bit more concrete to you. All right, going on to the personal statement. So this is leaving the best for last, leaving the longest for last, and probably what will take the most of your energy, time, and reflection is the personal statement. So the common application challenges you to write one long personal statement. I think it's around 650 words. Don't quote me on it, but it is kind of around a page, single space, and it's a lot of writing. And they give you 7 prompts that you can choose from. The last one is write your own. So you basically can write about absolutely anything, but usually what you think of might fall into the top 6. The prompts, I won't read them all, but range from kind of talking about your background to the obstacles that you might have faced and how you overcame them. A time where you questioned to challenge your belief. So a time where there was a status quo and you went up and stood against it. And I'll give examples of these too to get you thinking creatively, but maybe there was a time in your school where the school set a certain policy that you did not agree with, that you thought was treating you all, maybe the students poorly, maybe the teachers poorly. Maybe you thought there was a certain perspective that was not being listened to when that decision was made. And maybe you championed a group of students to advocate against it. Maybe you ended up meeting with a lot of teachers, you met with your school president, maybe you changed something. That is an idea that you could write for this prompt. The fourth one is reflect on something that someone's done for you that's made you happy or thankful in a surprising way. So it might be someone that you were sitting on a bus stop and someone offered you a cookie. You were on a college tour or on a general tour. You probably don't want to talk about a specific college here. You're on a tour and you were lost, and again, someone offered you directions and you were not expecting it. Or maybe you saw someone that you thought was really standoffish and didn't really seem welcoming, but they ended up coming up to you and they were the ones that really engaged you in a conversation. And that made you reflect that kind of can't judge a book by its cover. Don't say that cliche, but there are a lot of classic lessons that we learn in life that you can reflect on and think about what you've been through in your past 18 years of life that you can write about here, and especially those that have impacted your personal growth and who you are today. So one thing that I thought we'd do is delve into certain prompts. This whole series is kind of titled Navigating the College Process as Georgian-Americans, and the greatest way that you can show your Georgian heritage is by writing about it. And so I pulled two prompts, the first one and the second one, and I want to explain examples of how you could tie in your Georgian heritage in these two. The first prompt was, some students have a background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete about it. This sounds like you, then please share your story. So again, they're asking about your history, maybe your personality, your hobbies, your accomplishments, and why that's important to you. Some example questions that you can think of. Maybe you remember your grandparents cooking, and that can be kind of a way that you express your culture. Maybe you have gone to trips to Georgia. Maybe you haven't gone to trips to Georgia, but you've still had this strong tie to your parents' country and how that's shaped who you are. Maybe how your trips or how your lack thereof have shaped who you are and how you view your heritage. Maybe what are the challenges and rewards of being raised in a multicultural household, being raised as Georgian, also American. Maybe there are other ethnicities that you have, and maybe it's not only multicultural, but it's also multi-generational. Maybe your grandparents live with you, maybe your aunts and uncles live with you. How has that influenced the way you live and the way you look at life? Um, and then the second prompt, and I'll go a little quicker because I'm realizing the time is running up, is about an obstacle that you faced and how you've overcome it and how you have learned from this experience. A pitfall that people fall into in these prompts is spending so much time, even here, writing about your background and your identity, and more so writing about maybe like a certain story for way too long, and you're describing it for half of the essay, and then you're leaving half to describe about what you've learned, how you've grown, how you impact, how you take these lessons into your engagements, and how you thus impact other people based on it. You want to make sure that these 4 big points are spread across the essay, and then maybe that one story that you describe is in the first 1 or 2 paragraphs. You want to make sure that doesn't overtake the whole thing. Here as well, you want to make sure if you're describing an obstacle, you're not spending 4 paragraphs describing on who said what and when did this happen and what time of day it was. No, make it short and make the longer part what your reflections are and how you've grown as a person as a result. Also with this, think about qualities that you want to show based on the prompt. So do you want to show that you are a resilient person? Maybe there was an obstacle that you faced, maybe with your family or some hardship that your family went through. Show your resilience. Maybe you played more of a supportive role in your family and you provided emotional support for your family. Maybe you even played a financially supporting role, and maybe you took the initiative to get a job, maybe if your family was going through financial hardship. There are different ways that you responded to a certain situation, but I challenge you to not only think of it in action, like, oh, I patted my grandmother on the back, but think of it in terms of values that represents. That values your love of family, that shows your value of family, that shows your value of empathy, that shows your value of taking the time for your family to make sure that they're doing all right and supporting them. So these are just questions that you can think of, because not only is that what you experience, but that's also what you want that person who's reading your application to take away. Don't give them room to interpret who you are, show them who you are. And again, some questions at the bottom. What kind of, maybe this is a question that an essay that a lot of people write, maybe athletes write, maybe they got injured on the field and they write like 4 paragraphs about how they hit their head and how traumatic that experience was. Write about how you felt. Don't take 4 paragraphs to do it. Take the rest of the essay to write about how you kind of maybe found another hobby after your injury, how you had the challenge of reconnecting with your teammates in a different way, and how that taught you kind of the importance of being present and the importance of still remaining resilient, no matter if kind of the talents that you used to have are now not that useful anymore. All right, so with the time that we have left, it's around 15 minutes, I wanted to delve into a workshop, and I think maybe this might be the time to stop the recording. Yes.